I wanted to shoot a quick video on replacing the starter on a 1996 Chevrolet Blazer. There's some videos out there. I figured every little bit helps, and I figured Rod Shop going to contribute. One, get the vehicle jacked up, high enough to where you can get your hands up and work on the vehicle without being constrained too much. Secondly, you want to be able to disconnect the battery. A lot of people will disconnect the positive side, and that's fine, but you got to make sure you don't hit anything ground, it'll spark. So disconnect the negative side of the battery. The reason being is because the wires are going to be really tight when we pull the starter down, because you can't get to the wires, and you'll see that when we climb underneath. Now we're up underneath it, and you can see that the starter bolts are easy enough to get to. But where the problem lies on all these, and actually this one doesn't look as bad as some of them I've seen, because you've got room to drop it down and it'll probably slide right out this hole after twisting them. But it's the wires that you're going to have a problem getting to the back side of the starter to get the wires loose. But I'll show you with probably a swivel type ratchet where you can get them off. But I'll take a quick peek here and I'll show you. Also, a good note to make is anytime that you're going to change a starter out, you should always test the starter you're going to put on the car, regardless if it's a used one or a new one. If it's a new one, it doesn't hurt to ask the people you buy the starter from to say, hey, can you throw it up here and test it on your machine, just to make sure that you don't go home with one that's bad, because nowadays you can get 3 bad ones out of 5. So anyhow, what I've set up here is you can use the battery in your car, which more likely that's what you do. I just happen to have a spare battery. I put some bolts into the side post there to be able to latch onto the battery cables. Be sure to keep your polarity straight. Keep the red cable to the positive side, the black to the negative side. And then what I did here is I've hooked up the positive to the battery lead on the solenoid, and I just took the ground to a good bolt for on the starter casing. So I've used a remote starter switch to be able to test this. Now you can cross your positive cable straight over to your lead, but if it's a new starter and you do that, it'll arc it and it'll end up messing up the threads and boogering them. Or even if you use the nut on there, you'll mess up the nut where it's going to be hard to get the wrench on it. So if you've got a remote starter switch and be able to wire one up, I would just suggest that. But then all you got to do is just hit the remote starter switch. And of course, this is the starter I took off the Blazer, and it's bad. So, but I just wanted to show you that how you can test one. So always test a starter before you go and stick it on, because it sure would be a nightmare to have to do it twice. Okay, on removing and replacing the starter on a Blazer, 95% of the time the nuts that come on the new one are going to be the exact same size as the ones that come off of it. So the way the starter comes out, you can't see the nuts and it's really hard to tell. So the best guide right here is to use the nuts that you see on the back of the starter. In this case, it's a 13mm and a 8mm, or a 1/2 inch and a 5/16, whatever one you have. And it would be, let's see here, it would be this one, not this one. This one's already tightened down. It's just the starter lead. This is the one your battery wire goes to, and that's your starter wire. Now, looking up under here, you can see your starter wire sitting right there. I had to pull the starter out at an angle like that. It was actually hanging at an angle. And I just got behind him with a ratchet that actually is a flex head ratchet. It looks a little bit like this. It actually has it can flex and you can turn it that way. And I used a 13mm and an 8mm on a 3/8 to 1/4 inch reducer. Okay, I was talking about a flex head ratchet. This is just a little short stubby ratchet, 3/8 drive, and the head flexes like this. And what you're going to want to do is, with that starter at an angle, like I was talking about it hanging out of the frame, you'll put that ratchet right back here like this, and you'll have enough torque because you'll be able to flex the ratchet out a little bit like that, but you'll just work it with this. You'll do that on taking it off, and you'll do that with it putting back on. If not, a 1/4 inch ratchet you should be able to work one of those up in there fairly decent. But I would suggest one like that to get that battery cable off, because it is kind of a tight fit. As a tip, I removed the O2 sensor. It's pretty quick and easy. It's just a connector right there. Just snap it loose from the frame, unplug it. And that's an O2 sensor. And it took a 22 millimeter to unscrew it from the exhaust pipe, but it sticks out just in a way where you can't get your hand in there. That's a tip. If I can get back far enough to show you. I run my arm up inside between the frame and the torsion bar, and that way I can run my hand right up here to get to the back of the wires and stuff. It makes life a lot easier. With that O2 sensor out of the way, it doesn't hit the back of your hand, and you have room to actually run your fingers and stuff. So now it's just going back in with it. We'll see how that goes. Okay, the new starter's in, and I just wanted to kind of revamp. In other words, I took these two bolts out to hold the starter in, and it dropped down a little bit, but the nose of it was stuck way up into the transmission. You have to slide it forward on most four-wheel drives, and also depending on motor mount wear and transmission mount wear, the engine can settle and get closer, so some vary. And depending on if the starter's been changed out or not, usually the factory one's a little fatter, so and a little longer, so it won't slide far enough forward. If that happens, you've got to make it easier on yourself instead of sitting there fighting it forever, because it always lacks about a half to a quarter inch coming out of that transmission. So what you can do is go back here to the transmission mount. What I would do, these won't really affect what you're going to do, but go ahead and loosen these two up. That'll help you on putting up these bolts right here back in. There's one here and then one right on the other side there. Take those bolts out. Put a jack right on the transfer case. And just lift it up a little bit. You don't jack it up a lot, just enough to get the weight off this right here. And then you'll want to take a bar and a block of wood or something. And it's not a real big, it would be great if you have somebody to help you. I did it by myself, but you can put a bar right here in this, between that exhaust bracket and the tail end of the output shaft to the drive shaft there, and then just push it towards the driver's side. And what that'll do is that's going to bring the transmission back just about that quarter to half inch that you need, and the starter then will drop out. And it'll stick out this hole right here at an angle, and you'll be able just to barely be able to feel the nuts on the solenoid that you got to get loose, the two wires, the main battery wire and the actual starter wires. Now, it may be a good idea to put a bottle jack or another floor jack up underneath with a block of wood in between it and the jack, and kind of push up on the oil pan a little bit. That might give you the clearance right there to be able to get the starter out. You have to kind of twist the starter. It'll come out kind of at this angle, but you're going to have to twist it like this and this a few times to get the square part to come out that little hole. It looks like there's plenty of room, but it is a tight fit, but it will come out. And like I said, due to the age of the motor mounts, if they're sagging a little bit, the motor may be a little bit closer to the frame, so the best thing to do would be just to jack the engine up just a little bit without having to disconnect the motor mount. You just want to get yourself about a half inch, and you can probably do that. There's probably enough leeway in there. So that might help you get it out. Okay, after the starter, what happens? You put it in, wire it up, connect the battery in.